on or about the 20th of February of 1950, I'd gotten fired. So I was going down Detroit to watch a cowboy movie, and I was living close to Maplewood and Grand River, and I'm trying to, there's a bus, and I couldn't catch it. The guy, he ignored me, and it's always embarrassing. So I went back, and I was leaning against a light pole, as they called it, and there was a Ford dealership on the corner. So I looked in there, and here a guy, because we worked in a lot of dealerships through those days, because you'd go where the work was. So I seen a guy sitting on a big table in the showroom that they use for displaying different things, and his name was Joe Diskin. And worked for he was working with me at the Dodge dealership by the bridge, and so he looked at me, he recognized, come on in. So now that I remember, I missed the bus. So I walked in there and I started talking to him, and he told me he's selling cars and making good money. And so I said, so he says to me, he says, why don't you come and sell cars? I can get you a job. So I just was kind of standing there like a dummy. I didn't want to say no to him. So he introduced me to a guy named McKinsey. And so he talked to me for a while. Then Joe's shift time come, probably about noon, is over for the day. And so he left, and so McKinsey finally, after talking to me for a while, he said, no, I remember him looking at him, and he said, nah, my fella, he said, I can't take a chance on you. He says, I need experience. So I said, okay, and I was glad he said it. Didn't have a suit of clothes. Don't even know if I had a sport coat. So I go home. It's too late. I screwed up my movie. And so I go back home, was about a mile away walking. And so the next day I go, and the bus isn't there. So I lean against the pole, and I look back in the dealership. I didn't want to even look in there, and there he's sitting on the same table. And he looked at me, and he waved for me to come in. And he asked me what, and I said, well, he wouldn't hire me. And I said, it's all right. He said, no, he said, I got somebody to hire you. So there's a guy named Horace Morton Taylor, and they had crews. There was 5 men on a crew, 5 crews, 25 salesmen in the dealership. So he introduced me to him. So now Joe, after talking for a while, Mort kept looking at Joe. Joe's waving down to hire me, because he liked me. And so then Mort says to me, okay, I'll give you a try. So he decided to show me around the dealership. So we got up. This is our sales room where we have our meetings. And there was a bunch of handbills there. Well, we had used handbills and gave it to fill our garage full of work, but we couldn't fix the cars. So we'd have sometimes park them on the road, on the streets around the dealership, so we'd have some place to put them. And so I knew those things would work. So I says to him, he says, there's five crews here, 25 salesmen. Each has a different color. Ours is green. So I have to pay for him. And he laughed, and he says, no, he says, you can have that whole stack. He says, nobody puts them. He says, you have everybody's. He says, you got to put your name on them anyway. So that's when I started. So, but I had people immediately. That night I worked real late putting out those on cars, and I knew the part of putting them on junk cars because they needed a car. I wasn't going to put them on new cars. So by the next morning, people's coming in and asking for me. So it got to a point where Mort Taylor was in there directing the top salesman. They give him my ups, and I got full credit for the sale as if I sold it, and I get half the commission, and he got 10% of the profit. And so he had an angel on his hands. So then I started selling cars, and nobody ever beat me for a month. And so I got to a point where as years went by, I put as many as thousands out in a week. So I became the #1 new Ford salesman in the world at one point.